When action is required to preserve our national security, we will act. We will maintain sufficient strength to prevail if need be.
As I promised Cap Weinberger 2 weeks ago in his farewell at the Pentagon, we are not unilaterally disarming in this area or any other area.
Ronald Reagan, 40th President of the United States. During Ronald Reagan's presidency, he laid down a foreign policy with the Soviet Union that would be praised, criticized, and studied for decades to come. There are discussions to this day on the role that Ronald Reagan played in the end of the Cold War that had been affecting the United States since the end of World War II. As historian Melvin Leffler put it, scholars love debating the role of Ronald Reagan in the Cold War. Some say he aimed to win the Cold War, others claim he wanted to end the Cold War. Some say he wanted to abolish nuclear weapons and yearned for a more peaceful world. Others say he built up American capabilities, prepared to wage nuclear war, and sought to destroy communism and the evil empire that embodied it. As one can see by this excerpt, Reagan was a complicated man with a complicated foreign policy with the USSR. What this video will seek to do is to look into Reagan's rhetoric versus his action with the Soviet Union and the reactions received by those choices.
No one understands better than you here today that, like it or not, we are the leader of the free world. And that is not a role we asked for. It's a role that was thrust upon us by history and by the hopes of those who aspire to freedom throughout the world.
One of the main themes of Reagan's foreign policy was the theme of Americans being liberators. He led with the idea that the United States was the epitome of freedom, and it was the job of Americans to bring that freedom to oppressed people around the world. The country he fought to free oppressed people from the most was, you guessed it, the Soviet Union. Reagan often used harsh rhetoric against the Soviet Union, mainly mentioning their violations against human rights. Because of this, Reagan felt the United States had no choice but to take action against them. One form of action that Reagan threatened to take was the use of the newly created Strategic Defense Initiative, or SDI. SDI was a series of satellites in space that were supposed to be able to shoot down incoming missile attacks on the US with lasers. Because of this, it was commonly referred to as Star Wars and criticized by the public. Nevertheless, Reagan threatened to use it if the Soviet Union was hostile.
Well, SDI is a vital insurance policy, a necessary part of any national security strategy that includes deep reductions in strategic weapons. It is a cornerstone of our security strategy for the 1990s and beyond. We will research it, we will develop it, and when it's ready, we'll deploy it.
Despite these tough words, Reagan's foreign policy with the Soviet Union was considered rather timid for much of his time in office. In fact, many conservatives at the time felt Reagan was being too weak against the Soviet Union. Conservative journalist Norman Podhurst said Reagan's policy with the Soviets was a strategy helping the Soviet Union stabilize rather than break up. Mitch Decker, executive director on the Committee for a Free World, said Reagan was pursuing the same old policy of détente that presidents before had done. It wasn't until the US-Soviet summit meeting on December 8, 1987, that conservatives began to respect Reagan's pragmatic approach to policy.
Good evening. As I am speaking to you now, General Secretary Gorbachev is leaving on his return trip to the Soviet Union. His departure marks the end of 3 historic days here in Washington, in which Mr. Gorbachev and I continue to build a foundation for better relations between our governments and our peoples.
During this meeting, Reagan and Gorbachev agreed to the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, or the INF Treaty.
Under the terms of this treaty, we will be eliminating 400 deployed warheads, while the Soviet Union eliminates 1,600, or 4 times as many.
The INF Treaty succeeded in arms reduction of nuclear missiles, which had been a goal of Reagan's since he'd entered office. This treaty also paved the way for the eventual dissolution of the Soviet Union, putting an end to the decades-long Cold War. After hearing of the success of the summit, many congratulated Reagan and gave him all the credit for the INF Treaty, such as Amos Jordan, the president of the Center for Strategic and International Studies.
This magnificent accomplishment has come about under President Reagan's determined leadership. The world is now watching to see if the INF Accord will lead to a broader accord on strategic nuclear weapons and usher in a new era in U.S.-Soviet relations.
Like Melvin Leffler said, many people debate Reagan's role in the ending of the Cold War. Many people think that Reagan wouldn't have accomplished anything if Gorbachev hadn't been so willing to listen. I see this as an opportunity that Reagan took. He saw that the Soviet Union was falling behind and that Gorbachev was slowly transitioning the communist regime into a more open society with perestroika and glasnost. Because of this, Reagan decided to work with Gorbachev to develop better relations. Although many criticize him for either being too soft or too hard on foreign policy, the results speak for themselves. This is a diagram created by the Council on Foreign Relations. It shows the stockpile of nuclear warheads dating from 1945 to present day. As you can see, since the INF Treaty, nuclear arms have decreased immensely. Reagan's foreign policy impacted the way that international relations are looked at from the American presidency. Because of his success, more people accept tough rhetoric and account to countries that are a threat to the United States. But despite this, Reagan showed that it is important to be willing to meet at the table and hash things out in a diplomatic manner.
It could not have happened if the West had not maintained, indeed strengthened its will, its commitment to world freedom. So there was nothing inevitable about all of this. Human actions made the difference.